Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I am thrilled to have you join us on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles. We're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because finances are actually more about your emotions than the finances themselves. In addition, when you're going through a divorce, it's so important to be deliberate, to be prepared, and the healthier we are emotionally, the better decisions we tend to make financially. We are going to be a little general in our discussion, but I would love to hear from you. So please reach out to me on my website, lifecycle.financial. Again, that's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post your comments and questions on Facebook, YouTube, or the 36 platforms that you might be listening to us on. I've said this very often. Going through a divorce has a lot of considerations and many areas that somebody might not be familiar with. In fact, no divorce professional is an expert in every single facet of divorce. Attorneys are legal experts, CPAs are tax experts, CDFAs, finance experts, and so on. And the good thing is there is a myriad of resources for people going through a divorce. But sometimes you run into these areas that are like a black hole from a knowledge perspective, even to many of the financial professionals that are working in divorce. And so sometimes we get these, so to speak, subspecialties. It's very, very important to understand who to use in your divorce. And the world of cryptocurrency is one of these areas that's a bit of a black hole for many people. Cryptocurrency could be called crypto, digital assets. There's a bunch of names for it. The bottom line is, whatever you call it, you need to understand it. And this needs somebody who has a true focus and understanding on how blockchain and crypto works. And luckily, we have just that person with just that skill set joining us today. Chris Groshong is the president of CoinStructive and is a great resource for those going through divorce. I encourage everyone to listen, to go to his website. We'll be giving his information out. It's on the screen right now if you're looking at it on Facebook or YouTube. And it's a great way to learn. Are people hiding assets from you? What is happening in your divorce? Chris, I actually have not done a crypto show, so I'm more than excited to be having you join us today. I've had the show for over 6 years, and I've never really found somebody who I felt I could put on. So welcome to the show. It's great to have you on. Thank you.
Well, thanks for making the time to have me on the show. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. And, we've spoken a couple times, we've emailed, and as I said, there are just so many questions. I'm telling the audience now, we're not going to get through everything today. We definitely going to have a follow-up show. So please stay tuned because of that. A little bit of a shameless plug to keep listening, but truth is, it really is so important. I'm seeing it more and more in my practice, and definitely handing it off because it's not an area that is my expertise. So talking about expertise, Chris, how did you get into crypto and all the digital asset stuff?
Well, that's a great question. My origin story kind of goes all the way back to 2013, 2012, actually, when I was first introduced to the concept of Bitcoin. And I thought it was a Ponzi scheme when I first heard about it. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. And then about a year later, I revisited it and I read an article in a magazine, and like all the light bulbs went off. And I was like, oh my gosh, you can't turn it off. Like, if you can't turn it off, guess what? It's going to proliferate and things will grow and expand around it. It'll become a whole thing of itself, because the last technology that I remember that you couldn't turn off, like the internet, right, has done some marvelous things for people. So, and actually the whole crux of jumping from the biotech industry, which is where I was working, was really that I saw a future in a way to change how money is used or perceived, or functions. And I thought, well, what a great way to help people, because after I realized what the biotech industry is really about, it didn't really resonate with me as strongly as I thought it was. I thought that industry was going to when I had the ambition of a college student.
Right. I remember reading an article a little later than 2012 and 13, but they were saying like originally the underworld, the criminal underworld was so excited about crypto because nobody understood it. But it had just come out that like car dealerships had started using crypto, right? So it's, as you say, I mean, where it's going and how much just in 10 or 15 years, it's incredible. And again, before we kind of really dive into a discussion, can you give us a little bit of a working definition, a description? So many people throw around buzzwords. What is this? What is, what is a cryptocurrency? Give it just a short definition, if you would.
Yeah, there's so many definitions out there because of like the legislative work that I've done too, because everyone is trying to define them so they can wrap their heads around them and figure out where they fit into the laws. But honestly, like because there are cryptocurrencies that don't use blockchains, right? So like you can't just say, oh, well, if it's on a blockchain, it's a cryptocurrency. Like that's not the only prerequisite.
Right.
But let me just, I mean, everybody understands that cryptocurrencies are digital. Okay, so they're usually and they're software. Let's remember this. Okay, they're actually software running on the internet, and there's mechanisms for the security for the records, right? Which we call these like the blockchain. Um, but really, the important thing is there's two main things. One is no double spending, okay? Because in the world of digital things, right, it's very easy to make a digital copy, right?
Right.
If I want to create 1,000 MP3s and subvert some music artist's ability to sell the music, I can do that, right?
Yeah.
Very easily. But creating multiple dollars that are digital copies could be a real problem if everybody could just create their own digital dollars.
Absolutely, that would be
Right.
insane.
So the number one thing that cryptocurrencies really solve is the ability to double spend. Right. We don't want to send some money to Hirsch and some money to our other friend and try to cheat the system. The system knows, and it will only send the money to one person. So I don't have a specific like Webster's dictionary definition, but cryptocurrencies are essentially digital assets that cannot be changed or or cannot be duplicated.
Right.
And are very extremely secure through the cryptography that is used in sending them, and that's part of the reason why they are not able to double spend. And then I guess the second best attribute for cryptocurrencies is that they're outside of the purview of the government. So this is like having cash under your bed, right? You get to be the custodian.
I will tell you, it's interesting you say that, because on the tax side, through my tax practice, I have seen so many changes in them the government trying to get a real handle on how to manage this, how it should be reported, how it should be taxed, how it should be whatever. And they're struggling with it because, as you said, it's not the norm of what they've been dealing with for 100 years. So it definitely makes a difference. So with all of that as our background, I'm going to jump into the mistakes that people make, I guess. What is the number one thing that people miss when it comes to crypto and digital assets like the Bitcoin?
Well, specifically with divorce, right? I think the biggest thing that people miss are trying or actually getting the data. They don't. When you're in a divorce and there's crypto involved, if you don't have any data, you can't do any research. Okay, so meaning like I can't trace any transactions, or an investigator or a blockchain forensic specialist can't trace transactions unless they have the data. So finding the data is one of the biggest problems that people have when it comes to crypto and divorce. The second biggest problem that people have is not asking the right questions going into discovery. So I've seen so many people ask either variations of questions or the wrong questions, and if you take the question literal and you answer it the way it's been written, you may, from a crypto perspective, you might not have to give the information that was actually asked.
That's
you know,
interesting.
because of
Right.
the way it was worded. Oh, well, they didn't write this correctly, so I don't have to give them the answer. I give them the answer that they're asking for,
Uh,
right?
yeah,
And,
that's fascinating because, and I know we're going to speak about you've created a resource for people. We'll get into that. My tease for people, but I don't think most attorneys know often what are the right questions. So again, for people to listen, about 15, 20 minutes from now, you're going to dive into that a little bit more and give a discount code. But um, as you said, I've been deposed, I've been put on the stand as an expert witness, and you answer what is asked. You do not answer outside of that, right? And so what you're saying resonates so strongly because if you don't ask the right thing, you don't get the right information, and that's huge. And I always encourage people to be deliberate in going through a divorce. They look for changes in behaviors, look for things like that. So it's one thing, it's out there and we need to ask, but what would be some of the maybe top red flags for somebody to identify that a spouse might be hiding this, to even know to go down that route? Because if they never mention it, they might never know that it is even in existence. So, what would you say are some of those red flags?
yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about cryptocurrencies is that they are volatile, right? They go up and down in these semi 4-year cycles where there's immense gains and massive losses, right? Like
Right.
it is volatility at its finest, which is a great place to make money. But usually people during the upswings, there's such a euphoria going on that people talk about it. Now, if they're truly hiding assets, then and they're never going to talk about it. What are some of the red flags, right?
Yeah.
Ideally, you're going to look for hardware wallet. Okay, I actually have one over here. Let me see if I can grab this. So I have a hardware wallet. Let's see if we can see this guy right here. So here's a little hardware wallet. It flips
Okay.
out.
Just for those who are listening on
It
a
looks like a
podcast
thumb
on
drive.
Steam, it looks exactly like a thumb drive. Exactly.
It looks like a thumb drive, but it's not. So what people mistake these things for all the time is, oh yeah, my spouse has assets on one of these little thumb drives. And he says he stores his crypto on the thumb drive. Okay, well, it's not an actual thumb drive. It is a cryptocurrency hardware wallet. And what a hardware wallet actually does is it provides you the ability to sign transactions without it plugging into the internet. So it's a separation, it's a security feature. So essentially, um, the biggest misnomer though with a hardware wallet is that everything, like on a thumb drive, everything lives in this device, right? In this little thumb drive device.
Right.
You can make a copy of it, but it's only on that device. Well, a hardware wallet is not that way because the the way cryptocurrencies work is you need a seed phrase or a private key, right? That's kind of your like ultimate password and gives you the ability to send cryptocurrency.
Okay.
The public address, usually like when you see somebody say, here's a QR code,
Yeah.
right? And you scan it and you send them Bitcoin to their QR code. That's a public facing address. That's like your email address, right? Because you can get inbound email all day, but nobody can send out email from your email account, right? Except for
Correct.
you or whoever has the password. Now, in that thumb drive, or in this hardware wallet situation, if you have the private keys, you can go buy another one of these little devices, put in the private key, and you have the exact same copy, which means now you're essentially an owner of those assets too, because now you can move them.
Right.
So I've been in divorce situations where one party goes, whoa, we have this device. We're good. I no, the other party has the private keys, which
Right.
means they just buy another device, spin it up, and then they can move all of those assets out. And they lost their mind. They said, oh my God, we need to do something. Right. So red flags, look for hardware wallets. Second red flag, look for items on your bank statements. Okay. look for wire transfers to cryptocurrency exchanges, look
Right.
for the purchases of hardware wallets, right? I actually had one client who found out, it was able to confirm because she found a receipt through the bank statement that this device was purchased directly from the company.
Interesting.
Right. So there are real world things that you can tie cryptocurrencies to, even though they are digital.
Right.
Another thing that, like, kind of as a last resort would be when you get into this to even almost like after discovery. Um, if you have a feeling that there's cryptocurrency and there's a lot of it there,
Right.
uh, you you're definitely going to want to take the steps um, to make sure you're not leaving anything on the table, right? And so when you're dealing with things like hardware wallets and private keys and those other digital assets that are stored in those ways, um, it's it's not always easy to find them. All you need is one thread to start pulling at so that everything else can unravel.
Got
So
it. Interesting.
yeah.
So you mentioned crypto is notoriously volatile. Just to give kind of the audience a little bit of a sense, I looked up before the show. In the last 3 years, not a lot of time, right? The low for Bitcoin was about 25,400. I'm rounding that. It was as high as just over 126,000. So from 25 to 126, and currently sits at around 64,000. So in 3 years, if that doesn't tell you the volatility, I'm not sure what would, right? So with that, and I mean, Bitcoin can move $2,000 in a day, right? It's not like that was gradual by any means. How do they pick what's a fair valuation date for assets? And they change so vastly. How do you pick that?
Well, I always try to do the valuation as the last thing I do for my report.
Okay.
So it's valued essentially like the day of my report. If there's a vastly big swing one direction or the other, the parties will essentially ask for an update, right prior to either the trial,
Right.
during the trial, during mediation. Um, if there's an extension, then I'll have to re-update, or update my report with the new dates and the amounts. Because you're right, because it changes all the time.
Right.
And 3 to 5% move within a week, maybe nobody's really worried about it, right? But if it moves 30% in
Right.
like 2 weeks, you better believe that someone's gonna throw their arms up and say, "Hey, we need to recalculate this." So there is
Absolutely.
and honestly, the courts are really amenable to changing that kind of stuff because they also understand that it is rather volatile, especially when you get into obscure tokens, right?
Right.
Some of those have gone to zero. Some of them people don't want to get rid of because they're waiting for them to go up because they think they're going to be big. So there's lots of different situations that we run into, and we just you have to kind of take them as they come. But
Right.
nobody has any problems with reevaluating the pricing of
That's a
those
good point.
cryptocurrencies at the time.
So, I'm also going to throw out a couple other things just to identify crypto I'm into when you brought up the red flags. There are actually about 3 potential places on the tax return that could indicate that there has been trading or even potentially dividends, things like that, from crypto, not dividends, interest, sorry, from a cryptocurrency. So there are ways to look. Again, you need the right person for the right job. I said that at the beginning.
Well,
I can
as a
help you.
tax professional, Hirsch, I have a quick question for you. Like,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
when you see crypto on, or when you don't see, I guess, crypto on taxes, what can a spouse do to protect themselves? Like
I'm not
when
sure. Yeah,
crypto's been involved, but
right.
you haven't seen any crypto ever reported on any of the taxes. Like, what can a spouse do to help themselves in that kind of a situation?
Right. So I'll walk through where people should be looking, right? That might help answer. The one is if they've been trading, it's going to show up on a Schedule D. D is for the capital gains and the trading of equities and cryptocurrency. It used to be you literally would get like an Excel spreadsheet with 3,000 transactions that could be like 6 cents per, they've actually now got aggregators that will you send them that, they put it together and they actually give you like a 1099. Coinbase, or the bigger, or I should say the more established cryptocurrency platforms, they actually have 1099 equivalents that you can work for. So it would literally be potentially listed on that Schedule D, and the so to speak, the sub form with a lot of the detail in that is going to be an 8949, I believe, that lists out the detail of those transactions. That's one area where I would look. Another area is going to be your Schedule B for boy. That's where interest and dividends are showed, and often you will see something like a, Coinbase, whatever would be there. The other one that I find, and this is where I think this one's often missed for quite some time now. I don't remember exactly when they put it into place. If you traded, bought or sold, not just sold, crypto, there is a box on the first page that says, did you have any, digital asset transactions? You'd be amazed at how many people check that, even though they don't necessarily always show the rest, because it's not telling you that you sold. It just says there was a transaction. Transaction could be the buying side of it. So those are the three areas I always look at on the tax return to make sure, because I find very often I will lie, not me, a spouse will lie through their teeth constantly to save money, so to speak, by not having to share it. They don't tend to do that as well or as easily on a tax return. So they will very often have checked it off that box. Yes, I bought. They don't mention it to the spouse. But if you go back, I think it's probably about 7 to 10 years in that range now that you've had to say, did you buy? And most people are really pretty honest on that side. So that's where I would suggest that people go when it comes to the tax return itself. And again, as you said, the other forensics, if you looking at credit card and bank statements and all of that, all the transactions that you said, have they been purchases? Have they been receipt of money? The one I had not thought about, actually, quite honestly, the digital wallet, all of those kind of things are very, very important to couple with them. And I always tell people as well, there's no one panacea of all ill. You look at here and you've got, and I'm sure you the same way, you've probably got to look at, anywhere from 3 to 5 different areas, sometimes more. And you got to almost put the puzzle together sometimes to be able to say that. So does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. And we do need to go to a break. So before we do, give us a little bit on how people can get in touch with you or look at some info related to your company. What is the best way that they can contact you?
Yeah, you can reach me at coinstructive.com, like visit the website, peruse the site, and check out the different offerings. We have a special page just for civil litigation and divorce. And then if you need to email me directly, there's also a contact form on the website, but you can email me directly at contact@coinstructive.com. And that's where all of our intake requests come in, and we'll handle them and we'll get back to you right away.
I encourage people to, this crypto is real. I know it's digital, but it is real. And I'm seeing it more and more in the cases that I've been dealing with. And we will be back in 2 minutes. Don't go anywhere. Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. And we are talking all things crypto and divorce. We covered a lot of stuff in 20 minutes, basically. Chris shared a little bit about his background and his aha moment from I don't get this to wow, this is really powerful. And it is. Cryptocurrency, I think in the beginning was kind of the buzzword. What we see and the complexity of what it is versus 10 years ago even is enormous. You spoke a little bit about some of the mistakes, some of the red flags, some of the things to look out for. We spoke about how it's reported and things to look for on the tax return. Again, those statements that you need to look through or have somebody look through, the red flags around being able to see charges in or proceeds that might have come in. Again, sometimes you see something in the mail. Sometimes, there's something like that. I recommend to people also just think about over the last year or two, like what mail is coming. Did something come in from Coinbase, from Fidelity, from whatever, and they're not, why is it not on there? The other thing I find so often is people put a marital balance sheet together. Not all of that makes it over to that final settlement agreement. That's another big red flag for people to be able to look at it. And as Chris said, there's a lot of safety to being in crypto. The way it is set up, you can't duplicate it, all the rest of that. But at the same time, I think, it leads perfectly into my next question is that so many times a spouse is not being truthful as they go through a divorce. What happens if a spouse in, air quote, loses their private key or, the digital wallet or claims they were hacked or victim of fraud? They can make up anything. And because it's such a void of information, I think people would believe it so often. How do you prove if they're lying, or is there a way to so to speak, recoup or get back into your digital wallet?
So that's a great question, because we do hear this from time to time. I've actually worked a couple of divorce cases where there was supposedly a scam that was involved. One of them, the scam was involved while the divorce was going on, right? Now, that's ultimately incredibly suspicious, right? Like, you had this crypto for all these years, and then during the divorce, all of a sudden it got lost, stolen, taken. Like, right? So you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, is this legitimate or not, right? And so then the only way you can really tell is by looking at the actual blockchain data, right? So the great thing about the cryptocurrencies is that they are recorded on these permanent ledgers. Most of them use blockchains, okay? And that's essentially just all of the transactions that are batched up and stored in chunks of blocks of data. Right. When the first one's solved, then the next one gets solved, and those are permanently recorded for all time. They never disappear. They're always there, which means you can always go back and check transaction records and histories and then follow the money, because everything is connected. One wallet went to another wallet, then that wallet sent to another wallet. This is so much easier to follow than actual dollars, right? When you think of it from that perspective,
right?
Because they're all digitally connected.
Right.
So what I'm looking for is that digital breadcrumb trail, right? And figuring out where the money went, which is also what I do as as part of my normal job. I also do crypto fraud investigation work.
Right.
And I have a nonprofit that I work that I started to help victims of crypto fraud called the Crypto Recovery Alliance. And so all of a sudden now I'm doing not a divorce case, now I'm doing a scam case, right? And so I have to check to see what happens and where the money ultimately goes. Now, sometimes you can't make a decision because the data says things like it went into a mixer, a tumbler, or a foreign exchange. Okay, if it goes into a mixer or a tumbler, it's essentially being laundered. Okay. And it's extremely difficult to trace it. So the other side might say, maybe they actually moved the money through the mixer. That's not good. Okay. And they're liable for it. Now, the other party might have the funds maybe going through like exchanges to launder the money, because that's a normal thing that scammers do. And if that's the case, then you have to subpoena that exchange to find out whose account that is.
Right.
if it's your account, if it's the husband's account, or if it's tied to IP addresses associated, right? Now you found yourself into a very interesting situation where any of those assets, then usually it's 100% gets awarded to the other party for hiding, right? Because they're hiding.
Right.
So the great thing though about the blockchain and crypto is that you can follow the assets forever. And even if you're getting divorced 5 years after the scam happened, right? Because they have been hiding money all this time, then it's still going to be a record of it somewhere, right? Like we'll be able to do those traces and determine whether or not it was actually stolen or lost. Now, the other thing, if it's a locked wallet, like I don't have the keys at all, well, then we can put an address monitoring on it, right? So we'll watch that address. If it ever moves on the blockchain, those assets, then we'll be notified.
Somebody had the key, clearly.
Somebody actually had it. So whether it was hacked at that point, because there's a lot of talk about quantum computers being able to hack Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
Or if it was something else entirely, right? So, and I think the important thing to think here is that there are going to be situations where people are going to get scammed during a divorce.
Right.
It may feel like the ultimate bad timing, and it actually is. But I've seen it, and there hasn't been any malicious intent to hide or steal the money. It was foolishness, essentially,
right,
and lack of awareness.
Well, sorry, finish. Go ahead.
Oh, that was basically So you just protect yourself when you're dealing with strangers and and assets that are ultimately, part of your saving, your net worth,
Right. And I like, people put monitoring on their credit if somebody's using their credit. I like that idea, being able to protect, like somebody says, swear I don't have it. All of a sudden there's, a week later, there's a transaction. If you monitor
or even
that.
3 years later, right? Like if it's a savings or a retirement fund, essentially, they don't need to touch it for 10 years.
Correct.
But if it moves, you still go back to the court. I don't care if it's been 15 years later. Go back to the court. These assets just moved. And they went here, and now they went to this exchange. What is going on?
Yeah.
Right.
And I've got a million more questions. I'm going to get one more in because I do try to give some practical in this. Basically, you described what crypto are. You described a little bit of how they work. You've described the backgrounds of, the volatility obviously is a big one. How people try to hide it. Okay, so now we've got all of this. We know there's crypto. Let's get a little practical if we can, or at least a practical idea around crypto is when you're negotiating, is it better to be kind of cashed out for half of the crypto or what you would be receiving, or to have those coins, the crypto transferred in kind to your own wallet and split like you would a retirement account through a Quadro, let's say? What do you think is the way that people should be going?
Yeah, that's a great question.
And this is put that in there as well.
This is not financial advice, but there's two ways to do it, as you mentioned. You're either going to get dollars or you're going to get the crypto.
Right.
Everybody's situation coming out of a divorce is different. Some people have spent a ton of money and need cash to recoup, their cash reserves. So you can't really fault anybody for whatever decision that they're going to make based on what the situation they're in. Now, in a perfect world, what would I do? I would take the crypto, because as we talked about, there is no other place that you're going to get the upside of that.
Right.
Right? Like, where has something gone from essentially almost no value in 15 years to over $100,000? Right?
Right.
There aren't things that do that, right? And because Bitcoin is a fixed amount, meaning it's a finite amount, they're not making more. Bitcoin, what people don't realize is deflationary. Our dollars are inflationary. So if you can trade an inflationary dollar for a deflationary Bitcoin, you're already winning. Okay.
That's huge. And I like that you
Yeah.
said you really got to understand your situation versus like just a blanket, here's the answer. I think that was
You
also
can
very
even, oh, and the last thing, if
important.
you take if you need the dollars, you could take the crypto, you received it that day. That's your cost basis.
Right.
Then
Okay.
if you need to sell it for dollars, you're selling it basically with zero capital gains. Now, if you force the other party to sell it to get the dollars, right, then there's going to be a larger capital gains, most
Right.
likely. So
Got
you're going to want to consult someone like Hirsch to kind of take that direction. Do I take it now? Do I take it later? Do I make them cash it out? Because if you're still married when they cash it out, technically, then you're both on the hook for the
Exactly.
for the taxes. And another thing about the taxes is there is an innocent spouse relief that we didn't mention. If your spouse did a bunch of stuff in the background, had all these trades going on, and never reported taxes, you can actually file an innocent spouse relief with the IRS so that in 5 years, 7 years, or whatever it is, and the IRS comes back and audits a year where you were married, you have already given yourself the protections so that they're not going to come after you for that money. They're going to go after your spouse.
And
So,
there's a very specific way that you do that, and you've got a 2-year window. And I would recommend that anyone who runs into an audit like that, call me, because it's a very specific way that you do it. It's not a carte blanche. Everyone's the same. You've got to really do it. And it's not a given. So you really have to build the right case on an innocent spouse. And that's not just with crypto. That's with anything like that might have happened, just so you know. And I do want to touch base. We don't have a lot of time, but I absolutely want you to talk about the special interrogatories for the crypto in divorce. And you said there's a discount code for people listening. I'm going to give you a couple minutes to cover that, and then we got to wrap up.
yeah, so the special interrogatories are the questions for discovery. Like if you and your attorney aren't really sure what you should ask, this document is essentially a beautiful piece of different questions from different categories, all relating to cryptocurrency. So whether your spouse was staking or doing DeFi swaps or collecting NFTs, right? This document will cover all aspects of pretty much everything you could think of relating to cryptocurrency with
Right.
questions that your attorney then can ask in discovery or in a deposition. And the way that they're formulated is going to get it so that you get the answer that you need, not a runaround.
And there's a discount code on the screen, but I'm going to just say it out for the podcasts as well. It's my first name, Hirsch _75, HIRSCH _75. And by the way, I'm going to just add to what you just said. A lot of people think you buy crypto and you're done. It's not the only way that you can actually accumulate cryptocurrencies. And there were a few ways that Chris was just saying, but they can effectively, like a stock, there might be a bit of a split. There might be multiple ways that somebody is getting it. So it's not just the fact that they went out and bought the currency. There are different ways that people can accumulate that. And Chris, one more time, how can people get in touch with you? And then we got to wrap up. So,
well, the great thing is Chris Groshong is not a very popular name. So if you look for me, you can probably find me pretty much anywhere, like LinkedIn and things like that. But yes, if you want to get a hold of me directly, the best place to do it is through the website, through the form at coinstructive.com or contact@coinstructive.com, and you can email there directly. Thank you. Yeah.
Chris, no, I appreciate this because I learned a lot today, and I consider myself to know more than most. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing your insights. I think also making it understandable. So many people don't want to touch crypto because they have no idea what it is, how it works, who it is, where it is, kind of thing. So I appreciate the way that you actually conveyed that information as well. And the insights that you had, I think, are going to be invaluable for some people. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. I want to thank Silverio behind the scenes for all the magic that he does, just make it easy for us. Chris and I to have a conversation and learn and be able to share this information with everybody. You can reach me at my website, lifecycle.financial. Again, that's lifecycle.financial, or you can reach Chris again at coinstructive.com. Again, thank you for all of you listening. I look forward to you joining me on my next show. Have a great week. Thank you.